Whoa! That was a close call.
Hey guys, today we're going to be talking a little bit about fire. Now fire is a very powerful tool, but it is also a dangerous force of nature. Definitely not something to play with. But fire plays a big part in our close call true story today. Have you ever heard of a guy named Daniel? Who's Daniel? I'm talking about the same Daniel who God saved from being eaten alive in the lion's den. Roar! Roar! Don't worry though. Daniel was not hurt by the lions. The Bible tells us about a time when the king of Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar, invaded Jerusalem. The king chose some of the most talented Hebrew men to join his royal service. And guess who one of those young men was? That's right, it was Daniel. But today's true story isn't about Daniel. It's about three of his friends who were also chosen: Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The Hebrew men were given Babylonian names, and that's why in today's true story, you will hear them called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Do those names sound familiar? Well, maybe not. But stay tuned today to learn about how those three men chose to follow God, even when it wasn't popular or even legal to do so. So let's discover the truth about Daniel's friends and the fiery furnace.
Stories of the Bible, the fiery furnace. There once were three Jewish men named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Hey!
When they were very young, they were taken from Israel to live in a place called Babylon. At that time, the king of Babylon was a man named Nebuchadnezzar.
That's it. Almost there.
And he made a gold statue that was 90 feet tall.
Perfect.
The king sent a message for everyone to come to the dedication of his statue. When everyone had assembled, it was declared that people of all races, nations, and languages would bow before the statue and worship King Nebuchadnezzar's statue when they heard the sound of musical instruments. If anyone refused, they would be thrown into a fiery furnace. So at the sound of the musical instruments, all the people bowed to the ground and worshiped. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not, because they were Jewish and would only bow to the one true God. Some of the wise men of Babylon went to the king and told him that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow to the statue.
What?
This made the king very angry, and he asked Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego if it was true that they would not bow to the statue. Then he said he would give them one more chance to bow down, and if they did not bow, they will be thrown into the fire. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied that they didn't need to defend themselves against the king. They said, "If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up." The king was so angry with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that he commanded the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Then he ordered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be bound and thrown in the fire. The fire was so hot that it killed the soldiers that threw them in. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fell into the flames. But suddenly, the king jumped up and said to his advisors, "Didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them in the furnace?" The advisor said, "Yes." But the king said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around the fire, and the 4th looks like a god." Then the king shouted to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, "Come out!" So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire, and everyone saw that the fire had not touched them. They didn't even smell of smoke. Then Nebuchadnezzar praised the one true God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who had rescued them from the fire. And the king made a new command that anyone who spoke a word against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would be greatly punished. Then he promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in his court. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego trusted in God and were willing to die rather than worship any god but their own God.
Now that was a close call. But think about this. What would you do if every time that I played this tambourine, you had to bow down and worship this statue? And if you didn't obey, you would be killed. That's a lot of pressure, right? Well, don't worry. I would never ask that of you. We only worship the one true God. And the same was true for Daniel and his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They believed and understood the truth of our bottom line today. We can follow God even when it's not popular. Remember, King Nebuchadnezzar made it a law that every time the music played, everyone had to bow to the golden statue. It was the popular thing to do because almost everyone was doing it. And sure, I imagine that most of the people were obeying the king's order because they didn't want to burn in the super hot furnace, which I guess makes sense. But just because something is popular or a lot of people do it, it doesn't make it the right thing to do in God's eyes. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did something amazing. The king gave a command that would have caused them to disobey the one true God. And what did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do? Did they bow down or did they stand up? When everybody else was bowing down to that big golden idol, the Hebrew men stayed standing. They were making a point. They were not going to worship anyone but the one true God, even if everybody else chose to. No one was standing except for them. When the king was told that they were standing, he ordered them to bow. But this is where we see that close call moment of faith. They could either just do what everyone else was doing, bow to the statue, or they could follow God and stay standing. Bow or burn. The final time that King Nebuchadnezzar ordered the men to bow and worship the statue, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said this to the king: "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up." That's Daniel chapter 3, verses 16 through 18. 3 young men from Israel said no to the king's orders. The king tried to punish them, of course. He, in his anger, even put his own soldiers in harm's way by asking them to make the furnace even hotter. And the 3 men, they were thrown into that blazing fire. But too bad, so sad for King Nebuchadnezzar. He did not get to see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego burned in the furnace that day. No, no. What did the king see when he looked in the furnace? Were the men dead? No. They were alive. And there was a 4th man in there. What? Who was this 4th man? Well, it was an angel of the Lord, sent from God in heaven. God was with them, even in the furnace. When King Nebuchadnezzar saw this, he ordered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to come out. They came out, and everyone was shocked. The 3 Hebrew men were not harmed in any way. No burned clothes, no singed hair, not even the smell of smoke on them. The one true God had protected and saved them. Here's what the king said after this experience. Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command and were willing to die rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make this decree. If any people, whatever their race or nation or language, speak a word against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they will be torn limb from limb, and their houses will be turned into heaps of rubble. There is no other God who can rescue like this. And that's found in Daniel chapter 3, verses 28 and 29. Wow. The king's heart was changed because 3 young men chose to only worship and obey the one true God. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had courage because of their relationship with God. They were willing to die for what they believed. And one of the crazy parts about this whole true story is that they didn't even know if it was in God's plan to save them or not. But they stood anyway. What about you? When it's time for that close call for you in your life, will you stand for God? Remember this, guys. We can follow God even when it's not popular. Say that with me. We can follow God even when it's not popular. That might seem easy at first, but whenever everybody else in your class or in your family or even in your small group are doing the wrong thing, will you stand up for what God says is right? Will you have a heart for God like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Even if things don't go well for you in that moment, you can still choose to obey God. And we can all remember Deuteronomy 31:6 to remind us that God is with us and will help us be strong and brave, just like he did with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. What a great promise from the one true God. Now go out there, guys. Be strong and courageous. God is with you. I'm going out there right now. Bye.